General Oglethorpe signed or didn't, I don't know if he signed or not, but he had an agreement with the Yuchi Indians that we would not come north of Ebenezer Creek. And so the first groups of Salzburgers stayed on the other side. By 1750, the Yuchi Indians had moved north somewhere, but they had vacated this area, and then General Oglethorpe allowed the group that got here in 1751 to come on this side of the creek. This was not an organized town like Ebenezer was. It was land lots, most of them 50 acres, a few larger than that. It followed from Ebenezer Creek along the Savannah River for about 8 or 9 miles, basically close to the river. William de Brom, that came with the group in 1750, was a surveyor. Him and a man named Henry Young surveyed for the British, and Henry, both of them did a survey which is from Ebenezer going south, and it was all the people that lived from Ebenezer down to about where Goshen is today. And then he did this survey, and of course in your little handout you'll see a real clean copy of it. I took this thing and blew it up and added a number system to it. And by doing that, I could identify who had each tract of land. And then I went to colonial records and determined where a land grant was, or a plat, in some cases both. So my numbering system corresponds with this. Little yellow spot in the middle is called the glebe land. That was the land assigned to the preacher. Reverend Lemke was, and some others, received a 100-acre grant, which I don't know why in the world they needed 100 acres, but there's a little marker when we came in that says that, out there by the road. It went all the way till, I don't know, the middle 80s. There was a discrepancy of where this cemetery was. Mr. Freddie Helmy put that same marker, he put it about a mile down right at the corner where we turned. Several people didn't agree with him. About 1985 or 86, Reverend Seneca Shep Ron was a Lutheran preacher from here. He ended up in Jacksonville, Florida. I think he's the ancestor of this lost, lost or whatever. Some of the great grandchildren or whatever were going through a chest. They found a hand-drawn map, which changed all the rules, because he named where the names of the creeks were, and we were on the wrong side of Michael's Branch. It was the cemetery was here. Later on, a family named, it's called Cruz, but it's spelled with a K, on this land, and it was called Cruz Cemetery. So Miss Daisy Ron, husband had owned it, Mr. Ralph Ron. She said if we could prove this was a cemetery, she would give us 2 acres of land. So on July the 15th, I think it was 14th, 15th, and maybe even another day Miss Julia was here. It's like 2 or 3 days. A whole crowd of us came out here with archaeologists, and they knew they were going to put this marker. So you could never, once it got put down, you could never go back and see what's under there. So they got the county to come in with a road scraper, and they scraped out a couple of lanes, went down about 12 inches. Well, you know, when you dig a hole and you cover it back up, you have mixed up the dirt. The dirt that was at the bottom is now on the top, and when you put it back in, it mixes it all up. So Dan Elliott and Rita and some other archaeologists, he had a sprayer with water in it, and he started spraying the ground, and it was like magic. These spots jumped up and said, well, there's a grave right here, and there's a grave right here, and there's a grave right here. This is the original drawing of it, and that one there is another one of where we found these spots, basically where the crosses are today. My Uncle Walter Zolla, I know some of you remember him, he said, I sure would like to have that. So they copied it and gave him the 2 originals. That's where this came from. But these are the sites, and we said, well, we ain't proved this is a cemetery because all we see is spots on the ground. And so Dan Elliott was kind of hesitant to do any more research, digging, and we was all putting pressure on him. So he excavated one and found a skull and a coffin handle. So we knew we were on top of a cemetery. Then Reverend Raymond Davis, that was with us, preached a sermon, and we covered it back up. So after the dirt got put back in, my Uncle Walter Zolla built wooden markers, and even with good fat lighted timber, it don't last forever. So every now and then I have to come and replace this, and me and Miss Julia and a bunch of other people, they started a committee with a bunch of old men, Mr. Sonny Zitrower, Walter Zolla, Otto Ganan, Charles Ganan, and I can't remember who the 5th one was. They were going to keep this cemetery cut. And so that went about a year. I helped my uncle 2 different times when it was his turn. They rotated it. I was on a committee with Miss Julia and several others. We had a meeting every 6 months with Vince Exley. Vince Exley asked me in '93, said, Reckon you could find somebody to cut the grass. I found somebody. Then the next year at the meeting, he was all upset. He couldn't come, and he wouldn't. So he all of a sudden, I got it. The whole thing dumped on me. I became the custodian of this cemetery officially in '94, and I've been cutting it ever since. About every 2 weeks, from about April all the way to October. Okay. Happened to find something one day. There was a man named Michaeler, and that little branch that we crossed down there is called Michael's Branch, but the original man's name was Michaeler. When I looked up some of his land records, boy, did I find something. Lemke was Reverend Lemke. Depp was Valentine Depp. He's the man that the rattlesnake bit and killed. He lived pretty close here. Anyway, Lemke is the cemetery today. Reverend Lemke, it was in Reverend Lemke's name. But off to the side was a grits mill called Michael's Mill. It was here in the Revolutionary War. It is on some of the Kessler land next door. I know when you came in, you saw a tower off to one side, a radio tower or something. It's sort of behind that, down in that creek. But anyway, we had a grits mill here. Anyway, I'm a historian, not the only one, but I did a history project, came up with about 40-something names out of the Salzburger records. And then when we put the marker up, the Exley family had a family Bible that had some of the Exleys. I think they're on this side. They're on one side or the other. I don't remember which. When you get over there and look at them, you'll see old names in the 1700s, and you'll see a small group, I think it's right there, that was found later on. We found about 48 names, maybe 47, probably 200 are out here. Miss Daisy Roan gave us 2 acres from the post down there where that truck is to that post back yonder. So anyway, we had already decided to put in a marker, and the marker, you'll have to read it. It's got some German. Your brochure tells you about it. So anyway, that's my talk. Anybody got any questions?
Where was the general layout of the community and the town?
It wasn't a town. There was no town.
Houses?
There was no town. They were tracts of land running along the Savannah River with several of them on the other side of the river. Now, right here, this spot is Ebenezer, and this blue line here is Ebenezer Creek, and this blue line is the Savannah River. Yellow spot is where we are today.